We have here our little Hello World application, which in the meantime I've renamed from structure.py to hello world.py. And just to remind you what it looks like, I'm going to run it. Recall that if I click this close button, nothing happens, at least nothing visible happens. As I mentioned in the previous video, an event has been fired, but there was nothing to handle it. Let's fix that. In order to attach an event to a handler, we need to connect the two, and for that we use the following syntax. I'm going to say button.clicked.connect self.close. Now let me explain this line a little bit. Button is our QPush button with the text of close that we have defined earlier, and the QPush button just happens to emit the clicked event, which, as you may imagine, happens when the user clicks that button. The connect is what actually attaches our event to a handler, connects the two. The handler in our case is this self.close call. The self.close is a built-in method in QDialog and some other QWidgets as well that is simply going to close the window. One important note, even though this self.close is a function, we're not passing it as such. We're just passing it as an argument. What this means, translated, is that you should not add parentheses at the end of the handler even when we write our own handlers, as you'll see later. Now what we need to do is, well, we don't really need to do anything anymore. In a true Pythonic way, this one line of code is what does it for us. So let's test it. If I hit the close button right now, the application closes, and as you can see here, the process has been finished. Now let's do something more exciting. Remember that we have our Hello World Q label and an empty QLine edit. Well, what if we wanted for the text that we type in QLine edit to immediately appear in our Q label as we type it? We're in luck. There is a very simple way to implement this too. So if I just do line edit dot text changed dot connect label dot set text, this is going to work. But before I test it, let me explain this a little bit. Line edit is our QLine edit. The text change in this case is the event that is emitted every time the text has been changed in our QLine edit. Connect is the same as above, and the label, being our QLabel, has a set text method that's going to set the text of the label, as its name says. Now the set text does take one argument, which is the text of the label. So if I say label.setText hello world, it's going to set the text of the label to hello world. But notice here that we're not passing any arguments. Let's see what happens if I test this. And if I type here Pluralsight, you can see that the text in QLabel appears just as we type it right here. What happens behind the scenes is that every time a text has been changed in this QLine edit, an event has been emitted, and we have connected that event to our QLabel. Hello Bo. That works too. Anything will work. And of course our close button still works. But how exactly does the label know what text to update itself to? We're not passing any parameters. Well, I've already mentioned earlier that events can carry parameters or arguments with them. But to explain that a little bit better, let's refactor our code. Let's create our own method called changeTextLabel. This method is going to take text as an argument, and all we're going to do in this method is update our label. And to do that, I'm going to first need to make this label variable an instance variable so we can access it from other methods as well. And right here I'm going to call that same method setText and set it to this text from the parameter. This obviously needs to be changed to self.changeTextLabel. Notice here again that I'm not passing any arguments here. What happens if we test the application now? Hello Pluralsight. You can see that we have the same results even with the code refactored. As you can see, the text change event actually sends a parameter to our handler, in this case the change text label. But how did I know this? Well, from the documentation. The Qt documentation specifies what event sends what parameters and what types of parameters as well, such as integer, string, boolean, etc. Now I also want to make you aware of an older syntax for attaching a handler to an event. You'll still find this syntax being used in some older PyQt or PySide applications. This older syntax looks something like this. Let's get rid of that real quick. So if we wanted to accomplish the same result as we have with our line edit here, the older syntax would look something like self.connect line edit signal text changed. We need to pass the Q string, which is kind of a drop-in replacement for the Python string, as an argument. And finally, we need to pass our handler, which in our case is self.change text label. Yeah, you can probably see why there's a new style syntax here. You really should not be using this syntax in any of your code. This is just something to make you aware that there is this older syntax so that you're not confused if you happen to encounter it in some older code. Well, now that we know signals, or events, there's really just one more thing keeping us apart from creating our first real application, and that's layouts. You saw that I have been using them from the beginning. But why? Let's answer that question in our next video.